Before we dive into this incredible story, if you're enjoying these untold Hollywood secrets, please hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking celebrity revelations. Your support means the world to us. Now let's get into this amazing story. It was February 14th, 1965, and the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas was packed with 400 of the most powerful people in entertainment and organized crime. The Rat Pack was performing their legendary late-night show, and the audience included studio heads, politicians, and several figures who preferred to conduct their business in the shadows. Sammy Davis Jr. had just finished a brilliant rendition of Mr. Bojangles and was taking his bows when a voice from the audience cut through the applause like a knife. "Hey boy, come over here and shine my shoes." The voice belonged to Anthony Big Tony Marcello, one of the most feared crime bosses in America, and his words sent a chill through the entire room. What happened next would pit one of the toughest actors in Hollywood against one of the most dangerous men in organized crime, creating a confrontation that was so explosive it had to be erased from history. Now, let me back up here and explain the racial tensions that made this moment so dangerous, because understanding the context makes Clint Eastwood's response even more incredible. In 1965, the civil rights movement was at its peak, but Las Vegas remained a deeply segregated city where even the biggest black entertainers faced humiliation and discrimination. Sammy Davis Jr.'s fight, being one of the most talented performers in the world and a core member of the Rat Pack, still couldn't stay in the same hotels where he performed or eat in the same restaurants as his white colleagues. Sammy was living in two worlds, recalled Joey Bishop years later. On stage, he was treated like a king. Off stage, he was still subjected to the worst kind of racism. But the Sands Hotel was supposed to be different. Frank Sinatra had used his influence to make it one of the few places in Vegas where Sammy could perform and be treated with dignity. That protection, however, only went so far. Anthony Marcello was in Vegas for a meeting with other crime family representatives, and he had chosen this particular evening to send a message about racial hierarchy that went far beyond entertainment. Marcello wasn't just a racist, explained FBI agent William Romer, who had been tracking organized crime figures for decades. He was someone who used racism as a tool, intimidation and control. When Marcello called out to Sammy from his front row table demanding that he shine his shoes, every person in that room understood what was really happening. This wasn't just about humiliating one performer, it was about reasserting white supremacy in front of an audience that included some of the most powerful people in America. Actually, let me tell you about who was in that audience, because it makes what happened next even more significant. Sitting just 3 tables away from Marcello was Clint Eastwood, who was in Vegas meeting with studio executives about his upcoming film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Clint had worked with Sammy on several occasions and respected him both as a performer and as a man. But more importantly, Clint had grown up in a working-class family that had taught him to judge people by their character, not their color. Clint had always been different from a lot of Hollywood types when it came to race, observed director Don Siegel. He didn't make a big show of being progressive, but he treated everyone with the same respect. When Marcello's voice rang out across the Copa Room, Clint felt his blood pressure rise. The room had gone completely silent. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Joey Bishop were frozen on stage, knowing that any wrong move could have serious consequences. Sammy himself stood motionless, his face a mask of controlled humiliation and rage. "I said come here, boy," Marcello repeated, louder this time. "You work for me tonight." The crime boss's associates laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Everyone could feel the tension building to a dangerous level. That's when Clint Eastwood stood up. Moving with the same deliberate calm he displayed in his Western films, Clint walked directly to Marcello's table and placed his hand on the back of an empty chair. "Mind if I join you, gentlemen?" Clint asked in that familiar gravelly voice, his tone polite but with steel underneath. Marcello looked up at the tall, imposing figure of Clint Eastwood and for a moment seemed unsure how to respond. "We're having a private conversation here, movie star," Marcello said finally. "I can see that," Clint replied. "That's why I wanted to talk to you about man." Don't forget to comment below and let us know what other Hollywood confrontations you'd like to hear about. The entire Copa Room was holding its breath, Everyone knew they were witnessing something that could explode into violence at any moment. "Man?" Marcello asked, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Yeah. Manners," Clint said, sitting down without being invited. "See where I come from, when you're a guest in someone's house you treat the other guests with respect. And Miss Davis there," Clint gestured toward Sammy. "He's not just a guest here, he's the reason half these people came tonight." Marcello's face was reddening. "Listen here, Eastwood." "No, you listen," Clint interrupted, his voice still calm but his eyes taking on that famous squint. "You're embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing your associates, and you're ruining everyone's evening. Now Mr. Davis is a professional entertainer, and a damn good one. If you want your shoes shined, there's a shoe shine stand in the lobby. But if you want to continue being disrespectful, you and I are going to have a problem." The confrontation was now the only thing happening in the room. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Marcello's associates were looking nervous. They knew their boss's reputation for violence, but they also knew Clint Eastwood's reputation for fearlessness. "Are you threatening me?" Marcello asked quietly. "I'm explaining reality," Clint replied. "You can apologize to Mr. Davis and enjoy the rest of the show like a civilized human being. Or you can keep acting like trash and find out what happens when you disrespect someone I consider a friend." What happened next surprised everyone in the room. Instead of escalating to violence, Marcello found himself in a position he rarely experienced, being outmaneuvered by someone who wasn't afraid of him. "You think because you play tough guys in movies you're tough in real life?" Marcello asked. Clint's response became legendary among the people who witnessed it. "I don't think anything," Clint said, "but I know that if you don't apologize to Sammy Davis Jr. in the next 30 seconds, every person in this room is going to see you get taken down by a movie star. And that story will follow you for the rest of your very short career." The threat was delivered so calmly, with such quiet confidence, that even Marcello's bodyguards seemed to believe that Clint could and would do exactly what he promised. Marcello looked around the room and realized that he was trapped. If he backed down, he would look weak. If he escalated, he would be fighting a man who showed no fear and had the entire room watching. But Clint wasn't finished. "You know what the real problem is here, Tony," Clint said, using Marcello's first name with deliberate familiarity. "You came here tonight thinking you could intimidate people because of your reputation. But you picked the wrong target. Sammy Davis Jr. has more talent in his little finger than you have in your entire organization. He's earned the respect of every person in this room, while you've earned something else entirely." Clint stood up slowly. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand up, walk over to Mr. Davis, and apologize for your disrespectful behavior. Then you're going to sit back down and enjoy the show like a gentleman. And if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in Vegas knows that Anthony Marcello got schooled by Clint Eastwood in front of—" Actually, let me tell you what happened next, because it showed everyone in that room what real power looks like. The standoff lasted for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 seconds. Finally, Marcello stood up. His face was flushed with anger and humiliation, but he had clearly calculated that backing down was better than escalating with someone who showed no fear. He walked slowly across the room to where Sammy was still standing on stage. "Davis," Marcello said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I apologize for my inappropriate behavior. Please accept my regrets." Sammy, with the class and grace that had made him a star, simply nodded and said, "Thank you, sir. No harm done." The room erupted in applause, but not for Marcello. The applause was for Sammy's dignity and for Clint's courage in defending him. Marcello returned to his table, but the dynamic in the room had completely changed. He was no longer the most powerful person there. He was just another audience member who had been put in his place. The show continued, but everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. When it ended, Sammy walked directly to Clint's table. "Thank you," he said simply, extending his hand. "Nothing to thank me for," Clint replied. "Just treating a friend the way friends should be treated." But the story was far from over. Within hours of the confrontation, representatives from Marcello's crime family began working to suppress any mention of what had happened. Witnesses were approached and encouraged not to discuss the evening's events with anyone, especially reporters. The incident was completely erased from the official record of that night's performance. It was like it never happened. recalled a Copa Room waiter years later. People were told to forget what they saw and most of them did. The suppression was so complete that the story didn't surface publicly until decades later, after most of the principals had died. But among the people who were there, the confrontation became legendary. That night, Clint Eastwood showed everyone what real courage looks like, said entertainment journalist Army Archard, who was in the audience. It's not about being the toughest guy in the room, it's about standing up for what's right when everyone else is too scared to act. The incident also marked the beginning of a lifelong friendship between Clint and Sammy. After that night, Sammy and Clint became very close, revealed Joey Bishop. Sammy said that Clint was one of the few white entertainers who had ever put himself on the line for a black performer. It wasn't just what Clint did that mattered. It was that he did it when it was dangerous, when it could have cost him his career or worse. The confrontation with Marcello also enhanced Clint's reputation among his peers in Hollywood. Word got around about what happened in Vegas, explained director John Huston. Not the details, but the fact that Clint had faced down a major crime figure to defend a friend. It confirmed what a lot of people suspected, that Clint's on-screen toughness was real. For the rest of his career, Clint was known as someone who couldn't be intimidated by anyone, regardless of their power or connections. But perhaps the most important impact of that night was on the relationship between the entertainment industry and organized crime. After that incident, crime figures were more careful about how they treated black entertainers in public, noted FBI agent Romer. They realized that there might be consequences for open racism, especially when people like Clint Eastwood were watching. When Anthony Marcello died in 1987, his obituaries made no mention of his confrontation with Clint Eastwood. But when Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990, Clint was one of the pallbearers at his funeral. In his eulogy, Clint spoke about the courage it took for black entertainers to perform in the segregated entertainment venues of the 1960s. Sammy faced challenges that most of us can't even imagine, Clint said. But he never let hatred or ignorance diminish his spirit or his talent. He showed all of us what dignity looks like, even in the face of deliberate cruelty. Clint never mentioned the incident at the Copa Room in his public remarks about Sammy, but people who knew both men understood the bond that had been forged that night. The day a Mafia Don tried to humiliate Sammy Davis Jr. became the day that Clint Eastwood proved that real toughness isn't about intimidating the weak. It's about protecting them from people who think power gives them the right to be cruel. The incident was erased from history because too many powerful people had too much to lose if the story became public. But the impact of that confrontation lasted for decades, changing how people thought about courage, friendship, and standing up for what's right. Clint Eastwood built his career playing heroes who faced down dangerous men to protect innocent people. But his greatest heroic moment wasn't in any movie. It was in a Las Vegas showroom, when he risked everything to defend a friend's dignity against a man who thought he was untouchable. That's when everyone learned that the man with no name wasn't just a character. It was who Clint Eastwood really was when it mattered most. Someone who would stand up to anyone, face any danger, and pay any price to do what was right. Not because the cameras were rolling, but because that's what real heroes do. They show up. They speak up. They stand up, even when everyone else is too scared to move, especially then. That's the story that was erased from history, but it's also the story that made Clint Eastwood a legend. Not just on screen, but in real life, where true heroism matters most.